Hi, everybody. I'm Bustle.com correspondent Erin Delmore. I'm here with U.S. Senator Cory Booker, Democrat from New Jersey. Senator, thanks so much for being here today.
It's great to be here. Thank you for coming to New Jersey and doing this.
We're in Clinton, New Jersey, in a lovely restaurant. And right now, we're about 45 minutes away from Newark, New Jersey, where you live, where you served as mayor. And while you were mayor, you became famous for fighting crime rates. You fought to increase economic opportunity for the residents there. You fought for affordable housing, and you fought to protect the environmental sites in the city. But you might be best known, both here in New Jersey and nationally, for your work to reform the criminal justice system, which incarcerates more people within our country's borders than any other country in the world.
Yeah, we've got 5% of the globe's population, but we have 25% of the globe's prison population. And for women, it's even more dramatic. Women's prison population is increasing 50% faster than men. And of all the women on the planet Earth that are incarcerated, 1 out of every 3 is here in the United States of America. And women in particular, we over-incarcerate the non-violent women and women who come from families. Most women who are incarcerated have children under 18 years old. And what do? We don't look to empower people. We don't look to try to help people heal. We often put them in environments that hurt them, that traumatize them more, and then ultimately undermine their bonds with their family members.
And Senator, to that end, you, along with your colleagues Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, and Dick Durbin, have introduced the Dignity for Incarcerated Women Act.
Yes.
And you're looking to change the way women are treated behind bars in federal prison.
Yes.
That work has brought us here to Clinton, New Jersey. We are 1.5 miles down the road from the Edna Mann Correctional Facility. That's a state prison for women. But I know you're hoping through this legislation, you could set a federal standard for the way women are treated. And we're joined today by 2 women who are advocates, who are powerhouse voices in this sphere. I'd like you both to take a minute to introduce yourself. Topeka, go ahead first.
Yes, hi, I'm Topeka Sam, a formerly incarcerated woman. I pled guilty to a conspiracy drug charge. And I am, or have been incarcerated for the last 5 years. And I say that because I went in April of 2012, and I served 3 years in a federal prison in Danbury and in Greenville, Illinois. And then from there, I did 6 months in a federal halfway house. And for the last 2 years, I've been under the confines of the U.S. probation and parole system. So being incarcerated in the communities is another form of incarceration also. Since my incarceration, I founded the Ladies of Hope Ministries, which is a reentry program that helps women return home. I'm establishing Hope House, a reentry house for women. I'm a 2017 Soros Justice Fellow and a Columbia University Justice and Education Scholar and Beyond the Bars Fellow.
Because that's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I want to, this is something I notice about so many women that go through a broken system, is often not only are they fighters who come out to help themselves get back on their feet, but like you, they're standing up for other women. They really become advocates, servants, and leaders in a reform movement. But I even when I was in Danbury, I was amazed. I've been to lots of men and to male prisons, but I just found this incredible community of women looking after women, trying to take care of women. And I just want to say, Topeka, you blow me away with that resume you just laid out there.
Oh,
because
thank you.
Even though you said you're still under criminal supervision, you were making a difference in the lives of so many other people, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I became politicized in Danbury, you know, just learning about everything that was going on and coming from where I came from, which was completely different than a lot of the sisters that I was inside with, that I had met a woman who gave me Andrea James's book, Upper Bunkies Unite, and told me, find her when you get home because she's doing what you want to do. And I found her, and from that is the National Council for Incarcerated, Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, which I'm also the national organizer for as well. So we crisscross this country, and we're so happy to have been working with you on this legislation.
And we are so lucky to be joined by another activist in this
Okay.
space, Dehumanizing. Bain.
We're like getting all in there.
It's okay. It's okay.
In just a moment, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, hi. Thank you, Erin, for having me. Thank you, Senator Booker. My name is Tahiba Bain. I, as well as a formerly incarcerated woman, I was sentenced to 135 months in prison for a violent crime in which I pled guilty to. I also just finished supervised release after 5 years, March 23rd, 2017.
Where were you incarcerated, Tahiba?
Danbury Federal
Danbury as
Correction.
well.
Yes, I also went to Texas, Fort Worth as well.
Do you have children?
Yes, I have 2 sons,
How old are they?
22 and 18.
Tahiba, I'm afraid we're dating you a little
I know,
bit.
right?
Senator, I
I'm
wanted
22
to tell you
and
that
18, yes.
Tahiba has particular experience here. being the mother of really small children. I know
Yes.
that your youngest was 3, your oldest was 7 of your 2 boys when you were
Yes.
incarcerated. And I wanted to ask you, how were you able to parent while you were incarcerated?
Well, parenting while incarceration is very difficult. You can be torn between 2 worlds because you're inside and you have to obey by the rules and inside, and then you're outside trying to live a life as a parent, and you really can't do both, so you have to make a choice. And I made the choice to better myself inside, so when I come home I can be a better parent and a better person outside. But my parenting skills went as far as writing notes, writing letters to my children, calling them by way of collect calls or prepaid calls, as well as visitation. And when you are in face-to-face in front of them, that's when the most parenting takes place while you're in prison.
And Senator, this is a big point that you're pushing with your new legislation. You want to make phone calls for people who are incarcerated free. You want to increase visiting. You want to take that away from the discretion of wardens. It varies so much from institution to institution across this country.
Right.
You've made the argument that closer family ties, closer ties to a support system, help outcomes. Tell me more about that.
Well, first of all, it's not an opinion. The data says when you empower, first of all, people don't understand when you take away the primary parent from a child, that child goes into crisis as well. Often they're being taken care of by family members, they end up in foster care. If you have multiple children, they might be spread up and out into different places.
Right.
And so that's traumatic for the children. So we all know for the well-being of the child, having strong communication, strong parenting opportunities empowers how well that child does. If you don't do that, the child's risks of being falling into problems at school, being expelled from school, getting in trouble with the police themselves. So it is a societal urgency that we try to keep those bonds strong. But the other thing which is amazing is if you empower women behind bars to have those connections with their children, they actually do better. Their psychological well-being as well as their recidivism rates go down. So this is data, and what you just said there, and you need to back me up on the truth of this, is it almost seems as if that what the system wants to do, despite that evidence, is do everything it can to make it more difficult. They gouge you with the cost of the phone calls.
Yes.
They don't place you, as you said, in Texas, far away from where your children may be, having the consideration of where your children are, not be at all playing into the role of considering where you get your federal placement.
Right.
And then I've heard from so many women the indignity of having to make tough decisions. Am I going to scrape my pennies together to call my children? Sometimes they're in 3 and 4 different locations where they limit the number of minutes I can have talking to them. Or am I going to use my money for basic health care needs? Like, they don't provide quality tampons, quality sanitary napkins. And so women are often trying to scrape their money together to buy basic to meet their basic health concerns, at the same time of trying to figure out how they're going to make those calls. So my legislation says we should not be charging for those calls. We should not be charging for emails. We should not be charging for Skype calls and things like that. And we should be placing women closer to their children and facilitating more contact, not less. But I wonder if you all can maybe tell some of your experiences with some of those challenges of communicating with your kids.
Topeka, you were in the unenviable position of having a major health scare while you were incarcerated. Tell us a little bit more about that and about some of the supplies and materials that you needed during that time, how you were able to make it work.
I had uterine fibroids, and it required for me either to get a myomectomy, or I would have had to got a hysterectomy if I didn't, take care of it right away. And when I started my time, I started in the county jail in Virginia, and at which time they had to take me out. And when they took me out, they took me in a black and white suit, and then brought me from there to the hospital and shackled me. And I had the surgery shackled, and I couldn't let my family know. All of my contact was out. So, we think about going into surgery and going to the hospital and how frightful and frightening that can be. But then to think about being shackled. So, when I talk to the sisters who tell me about them going through the experience of having their child while shackled in prison, it felt like I can feel, what they felt like going through that experience. And then once I got to Danbury and I expressed to them that I felt that, the procedure they said they did, that nothing happened because my cycles were still heavy, and they would only give me a certain amount of pads, a week. They told me that I had to quantify my period, which meant I had to give them the soiled pads, keep them in my room. I said, well, can I have like a hazmat can or something? And they were like, no, because I had a bunkie and I didn't feel that was, cleansely, and I would have to give them these pads. They would have to look at the soiled pads in order to reissue pads. And that went on for the entire year I was in Danbury. And then when I went to Greenville, Illinois, the same thing happened until a doctor who had come in had just touched my stomach, and she was like, oh my gosh, your fibroid is huge. And I just broke down. And I was like, well, thank you for acknowledging that I know what's happening with my body. As women, we know when something's going on. Right. And so she then prescribed me to get, you know, pads that actually would help me with this cycle.
Topeka, if not for that prescription, you would be digging into your own pocket on a fixed salary if you have a job. And Tahiba, I know sometimes people don't understand how little money is in the pockets of people and what things cost. Can you paint a picture for us?
Sure. Working inside of a prison, you only get 12 cents an hour. Unicor, which is the industrial complex, you know, machine that actually fund the most paying, the highest paying positions inside of a federal prison, it's about 46 cents an hour, and you can upgrade, so to speak, right? What if that means anything? However, the products that's on the commissary list is half the price inside that it should be outside than they are outside, meaning that I'm paying double than I would pay for it outside.
Yeah, so in other words, inside they're twice as much.
Twice as much. And we don't make as much money. We don't, and so we have, as well as trying to figure out, are we going to pay for sanitary napkins? Are we going to pay for school? Phone calls. We have other stuff that we have to address as soap. We don't get paid. We don't get soap. We don't get dishwashing liquid, toothpaste. We don't get that stuff. So we have to pay for all that, and it's double.
You remember, you're paying twice as much.
Twice as much. We're paying double the amount that we would get it from CVS or any other drugstore within inside the prison walls.
What if you don't have family members who send you money? What if your expenses exceed what you have in your account? What follows you out?
You come home with what you have, and if you don't have anything, you don't have anything to come home with. They'll probably give you like maybe $100 to get the bus, and that's it. When you're inside and you don't have money, and your family don't have money to actually help support you, sometimes they go into debt trying to support you, and they don't try to afford you any other resolve in that position. So you have to do what you have to do. Topeka, would you like to back me up?
Yeah, well, I can add to that, because when I was in the county jail specifically, they charged $2 a day for people to be there. So if you didn't have a job, because there was maybe one job anyway, then your family would have to pay the $2 a day, which meant that if you needed commissary or to buy these personal items, if you had a debt on your commissary books, you couldn't order them. If you needed medication, you couldn't get it.
Nope.
And so what happens is once you leave the prison, then of course the debt goes with you, and it ends up being a collections debt.
Well, a couple things I just want to add that you all are touching on. So one is, most folks don't understand that so many women are being incarcerated, are coming from environments that are not stable, that they're again, survivors of violence. They might come in with an addiction. So now you're struggling to recover from an addiction. You're going through withdrawal. You have no resources. You have no support system. And you're struggling in all of that. And now you can't even buy soap, toothpaste, sanitary products. So that's the thing. You're taking people who have already been traumatized, who faced abuse, and you're putting them in an environment that is not a continuum of care, helping them deal with their addiction or their trauma, but is actually re-traumatizing them, where they're just struggling to stay afloat. And what you said, and again, I don't want you to gloss over this at all. Please understand what she just said. They are taking women who are having children. You are literally giving birth, and you are being shackled down while you're giving birth. Like, is there really a risk that you're going to get up from that table and try to escape or do something?
Absolutely
It is
not.
absolutely an abhorrent behavior that you're shackling pregnant women, or shackling women that are undergoing procedures like you're talking about, or putting women who are pregnant in solitary confinement. What does that do to their unborn child? That kind of stress, that kind of trauma. So these are the kind of things that are going on inside prison. Meanwhile, you're trying to be a parent. You're trying to think about keeping these bonds tight. And then you said, when you leave, and this is what I think you were getting at, you're barely giving that much money to get a bus ride to what? Are you going back to the environment that caused the trauma, or going back to be involved with a man that caused you to get involved in criminality in the first place? What's your stability? Can you get rent paid? Can you get food? And so women are often falling back in environments which make them susceptible to be victims again, or survivors again of trauma. And so that's what's so offensive to me, is that we don't have a system that helps. It's not about restorative justice. It's often about not healing, but doing more harm, and putting people who are already survivors of trauma in situations where they can be victimized again.
Senator, your legislation would expressly ban shackling pregnant women not only during childbirth, but during pregnancy and also during recovery.
Yes.
Now, as a reporter, when I speak to people about the Dignity Act, they're shocked that this is still a practice that's done in the United States. And while around half of states have banned shackling during pregnancy, during labor, the other half don't expressly have those laws on the books. I also have people who say to me, well, how many pregnant women could there be incarcerated in the U.S.? And Senator, as I know you know, as I know your office knows, there aren't good statistics on this. You have to dig all the way back to a Bureau of Justice report from 2004. And basically, the number is around 10,000 women a year, 10,000 pregnant women who are incarcerated in the U.S. per year. 3% of people entering federal prison, 4% of people entering state prison, 5% of women entering county jail.
This is when I tell people about what's in this bill, so often they're thinking, well, that still goes on? That still happens? Women are having to not getting a quality sanitary products provided for them? That really? These are things that sort of surprise people, but they are particularly going on. And this is why people ask, well, why are you doing a women's in prison bill? And I'm saying because I didn't know this. I would bump into formerly incarcerated women when I'm out speaking about these issues, and they pull me and say, listen, you need to know what's going on. And so this is a basic bill about dignity, and it's actually a bill that you all know that what do we want in our society? Do we want to return people to the streets and give them no chance to fight? Because you all know, just for anybody, male or female, when you get back out of prison, nobody wants to hire you. I know in Newark, you can't, Burger King doesn't want to hire you if you have to check that box and say you're formerly incarcerated for nonviolent drug crime, things that Congress people and senators and 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to, not just smoking a little marijuana, more serious felony drug crimes. So these folks are getting away with it, but now we're going to make you not able to get a job, not able to get a Pell Grant, not able to get business licenses, not able to get food stamps. So now if you get custody of your children and you're being denied public housing and food stamps, how can you help provide for your family? And so this, we almost, in fact, Brian Stevenson calls it, for women in prison, in his incredible book, Just Mercy, he says we create a class of untouchables because we put them in such a position where they're shunned into a second-class citizenship, they're undermining their ability to help their children, and they're offered very little support whatsoever. And it's so against our values as a country, and so against this idea that once you've served your time, we should give people a fair shot at being able to get themselves back on their feet and participate in society.
Ladies, what's it like for you to hear the senator talk about these changes that he and his colleagues want to make? What's it like for you to hear?
I mean, I think it's refreshing. It's hopeful. And what I would like is also to add some of the other things that are in the bill that I don't hear, talked about a lot. Just even the fact to let people who are formerly incarcerated go back into the prisons and help mentoring.
Yes.
Like how important that is. We go around the country and we visit different women in prison. Some of the prisons will let us in. I still haven't been able to get clearance to go back into Danbury. But the bottom line is it's because you see someone else out here and they're helping to navigate. I came out and I had a network of sisters who were formerly incarcerated and that were able to help. And that's how I've been able to navigate and be so successful in this process in such a short period of time. And I think that is so important, So, I mean, I'd like to thank you and highlight that because although, it is important to highlight everything else because it's necessary, but then it's also what do we do when we get home, right? And that is so important. We have to have that connection because you think about some of the sisters that have done over 20 years. The sisters they left inside, that's their family. So now this is a whole nother family that now you're ripping us apart from, and now I'm thousands of miles back and you don't want me to email or even communicate, and then when we do, it's still at the cost of the person inside. So,
Yes.
I mean, I'm grateful for these specific additions, which are aside from everything else, so thank you.
Yes, no, thank you.
Topeka, you've talked a lot about this sense of camaraderie and this sense of supporting each other within the prison's walls. Senator, you mentioned you saw this firsthand at Danbury, and you've mentioned people have talked to you about it. Now, Tahiba, you've told me about a young woman who was with you in Danbury who was pregnant at the time, and I know you feel very affectionate toward her. Can you tell us a little bit about what her experience was like as a pregnant woman who gave birth in prison?
Well, the first experience in totality, it was dramatic. She went through a whole process of the motherhood thing, and then when she actually had the baby, she went away and she was able to stay with the baby for like 3 months, and then the baby, the mother came and got her. And then she had to come back to the regular dormitory. And when she came back, she cried for 2 months. And she didn't know what to do. And then after she came home, she was away for like 5 more years after the baby was born, after the little girl was born. And the little girl didn't know her. the little girl was not told about her. She wrote letters to her, and she asked me what to do. And, you know, I don't know what to say in situations like that, because what do you say to a person that just had their baby removed from them after, you know, being, you know, having them for 9 months and then birthing them and then giving them nourishment and nutrients and, you know, by breastfeeding or whatever she did for 3 months and then taken away. We know who we are. We understand the plights in which we go through. No one else really can understand that. We lift as we climb. Without that, we kind of sort of perish. You know, the bill is great for that, because we need to be able to say, yeah, you know, I know this works, because it does. I'm a prime example. Topeka's a prime example, and there's so many others that are prime example that say that the mentoring component within your bill is actually a catalyst that actually helps reduce the recidivism rate, because we are trailblazers of what we have to go through upon reentry. And I mentor women now. I mentor men and women that come home from prison, but more importantly, women. And I help them through the barriers of reentry as far as being women. I help them understand that, you know, there's going to be hard times, and there's going to be ways and trials and tribulations in which, you know, you're going to face and you're going to bump, but don't give up, because if you give up, then that's when you let go and you let them win. So with me carrying them on my back as I go, and I don't have a problem with that, and most of us don't, because that's what advocacy and activism is, taking on the fight by all costs. We help the next person, and with that, they can in turn help the person coming behind them.
But I just want to, and I'm so happy you were telling real stories and have allowed me to do the same, because I just don't think people get what happens. If you go to visit jails in America, the people that we're incarcerating, and by the way, we're talking about jails versus prisons. Jails often people that haven't even been tried yet. And if you go to our jails, it's full of people of low-income folks, mentally ill folks, addicted folks, disproportionately women of color. But the stories, and I'm so happy it's the formerly incarcerated women and girls, because what people don't understand, having sat with women, but their story starts often when they're girls. You know, one woman I was with, she was drug addicted, and as a result of drug addiction was sexually violated over and over again. And these are stories I know you women know. And so here's a person that is sexually traumatized as a girl, gets caught up in a system then that system doesn't heal them. It doesn't ingest their sexual trauma. It doesn't give them drug treatment. All of these things that you would think that a person in that level of crisis with the kind of support they would get. This one woman I'm talking about, she enters the adult system. They're not training prison guards, the correctional officers, these male correctional officers, about how to deal with women who've been victims of sexual trauma over and over again. So she's telling stories about trying to walk through recovery, having been sexually abused over and over again by men, and then having male guards walk in when you're using the bathroom, walk in when you're significantly undressed, and how the system is just not healing people. And so the thing that really moved me about women incarcerated, because it is the women who are in this environment know that they're not getting the support most often, and so they band together to try to be the healers, to try to be the helpers. And the stories of that kind of heroism to me is incredible. But why can't we create critical care communities within our correctional facilities that really are attuned and trained towards issues of trauma, towards issues of addiction, that really are helping people heal? Because the greatest healthcare, mental health facilities in this nation are not hospitals or supportive housing, there are prisons. The greatest place holding addicted people in this country is not detox facilities, is not facilities that have inpatient, there are prisons. And in those facilities, they're not getting healed or made whole. And women in particular, and we know this about, I live in a community where I've seen many women go through this. Once you get addicted, once you're in a partner relationship, it can end up being very abusive sexually, very damaging. And then when that partner is leading down that path of crime, you often get dragged into it and into a court system that doesn't see your humanity, doesn't see your dignity, doesn't see your mental health needs, doesn't see your substance abuse needs, and just further grinds you through it. So I just wish everybody could understand the horrors that we allow to go on in our system that actually work against the public interest, because they're not lowering recidivism, they're not making us safer, and it's costing us so much more money, so much more money than investing in the kind of comprehensive care communities that we should be creating through our criminal justice system.
Senator, your work is to legislate for better outcomes at the federal level, but what you do, especially in speaking engagements like this, is you put a face on the voiceless. And ladies, you're doing the same thing by being here with us today. It's worth mentioning that this is the segment of the prison population that's on the rise. If numbers are up 500% since 1980, right, Senator?
Yes.
That's overall, but if you look at just women, the rates of women going into jail and into prison is up 700% since 1980. And these women are overwhelmingly victims of abuse. 8 in 10 are, as you said, Senator. And these women are mothers. 80% of them are mothers, 65% have a kid under age 18. 50% of those women are more than 100 miles away from their kid. And Senator, I want to ask you, how does your bill aim to lessen the impact on families when a member is incarcerated?
Well, a number of those things we try to address. So one, right now the criteria of where a child is and where you put a mother does not enter. That should be one of the main missions, is to keep a parent closer to their child so they can easily visit it. You said that it's so critical, that face-to-face contact, which is really important. And then we say, let's, and I've talked to Ward, why do we have these rules that limit minutes and limit contact? We say, well, we don't want people doing drug business behind bars. I'm like, fine, you're allowed to monitor calls. Monitor the calls. If they're talking to a 6-year-old child, they're not conducting drug. Maybe they're telling their child, to take some Tylenol, but they're not doing drug business. There's ways to get around what the high public interest is, and to control for the safety concerns that you have. We should have abundant communications between mothers and child. It serves the public interest, and it's the humane thing to do. So those are some of the things within the bill that are really critical to serve that public good.
I see you both with a little smile on your face.
Well,
tell me why.
For the warden to express that they don't want them to do drug deals, like, that's the furthest thing from most people's minds inside of prison, is to conduct a drug transaction. And it doesn't happen over the phone. It happens within the facility between officers and inmates and officers and officers. So that was just like a farce right there. Like, no, that doesn't happen. Label it and say whatever you want as an excuse as to why, but it's just to dehumanize you and to keep you dehumanized and to keep you oppressed, because without that human interaction with your family or any loved one or any significant other or any person outside of the walls in which we are confined, it tears you down within yourself. So if you, video conferencing is great, and we need that for people that are here and your families here. We need that. But if you can place us closer to our families, that will give us a sense of humanization again. That will bring a sense of dignity and self-worth. And, I'm not forgotten, because we are the forgotten behind those walls. And I want to thank you, Senator, for actually saying the piece about when women go inside. We're not going in just because of the crime that we committed. This is something that happened and started when we were girls, and that we've been holding on to traumatic experiences and things that has happened to us that we don't even have an outlet to even let go of. And when we're in prison and when we commit a crime and we go into prison, the people that's in the prison, they understand that.
Right.
So that was very profound, and I want to thank you for that, because not a lot of people understand that.
But you also understand that, first of all, women are disproportionately nonviolent offenders compared to men. And even things we call violent crime in this country are not violent crime. If a woman is in a car, the man goes out with a gun, sticks somebody up, the woman gets charged with a violent crime as well. So please understand that we are pushing so many women, as we stacked up these mandatory minimums, are doing nonviolent things. Suddenly they're finding themselves facing 5, 10, 15, 20 years in prison. And if they make a choice to try to fight and not take a plea bargain, most Americans think our criminal justice system is still juries and trials. 98% of the people being put behind bars are being put behind bars because of plea bargains. And we all know that they're not bargains. Somebody comes to you and says, you either take these 5 years, or I'm going to move you to adult court and stack these mandatory minimums. You're going to face 25 years. You often make horrible decisions because you feel like you've got no choice but to accept a guilty plea. And so, you know, this is a justice system that, again, Brian Stevenson says treats you better if you are rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent, because it just grinds people down. We're often victims who need help. It actually treats you like you're criminals and furthers the pain and the assault and it's going on in your life.
And that treatment is something that's felt not only upon entry into the facility, but also sometimes in interactions with the guards. I know you both have told me that you've had a hard time in that space. And Topeka, nothing stands out to me more than your stories about being transported. You were in 3 different facilities during your incarceration. And you were telling me that sometimes moving from one to the other can be the most harrowing part of your experience.
Right. It actually was, you know, being shackled from your wrist and your ankles around your waist, and being transported in a van without any bathroom breaks for maybe 6 to 8 hours.
And you're again, you were in prison for so-called conspiracy around narcotics.
Right, and there were no drugs. It was a sting operation, but that was my case, right?
Right, and there were multiple parties involved.
Yes.
I mean, these are the
Some
kind of
of
things.
I didn't even know.
Right, so that's what I'm saying.
Right.
And this is a lot of because of the way we have constructed our drug laws. It's somebody who's not even around drugs, but they can start putting a whole bunch of folks together and end up having you getting caught up. So you're a nonviolent offender with a conspiracy charge, and you're being shackled in the way that you are.
Right, and that's what I was talking to you about, Aaron. The fact that, you know, getting transported this time and then getting on this plane, going to the airlift, and you know, I was trying to explain how horrific that was to see all of these, you know, people of color mostly, but at this airlift, and everyone is shackled and chained and just standing in rows, and busloads of people. I mean, like 50 buses and people with these guns just pointing at you, and it's raining or it's snowing. I mean, you know, I transported in different climates, and you're standing out there whether you're getting soaked, and then you end up on the plane where it's freezing cold, right? So I could have, when I was leaving from Danbury to Greenville, it was pouring raining, so we had to stand out in the rain and then get on this cold plane, right? So automatically you know you're going to be sick, right? And then the whole time you're on the plane, you have to wait until you get to Oklahoma, because everyone goes through the transfer center in Oklahoma, and then you're there, and it's like you get up on the slave block, and everybody's chained together, and then the guards are standing down there, and then you go through everything, and then it's the cough squat. You know, it's just all of the dehumanizing things, and then you're pushed back in this cell, and then the cell is freezing cold. And I was explaining how I remember just looking up at the vent and seeing all these like wet balls, because people were trying to block the vent because of how powerful and cold it was, and it's just dark, and then you're just sitting there, and then you don't know where you're going to go next and how long that you're going to be there, and then it's just over and over again, and then you just think like, wow. And you hear people screaming through the toilets, like, you know, because the men are in different, they're either above you or below you, so you can hear them talking through the toilets, like trying to hold conversations, because sometimes people have been in there for weeks, you know, and haven't even been able to get out through their cell. And through all of this, you haven't really even eaten the entire day. So you could be on a plane for 16 hours picking up other people. And it's just the worst vision that you could ever think of in your, I mean, it was my worst experience through my entire time in prison, the worst, that transport.
And the entire time that you're being transported, you're shackled like a hog tie, because you have the black box that connects to the handcuffs, that connects to the leg irons, that just, and you're walking literally like a shuffle.
Right, and I went to a camp.
With your hands in front of you, and you know.
Right, so it's like I go to a camp and considered, you know, low risk, or, you know, because you have different custody levels.
Right.
So I didn't have the luxury of being able to turn myself in at the facility the whole time. I had a no bond, right? So it's not even that it was a cash bond, it was no bond because of the charge and where I was at in Virginia.
This idea of stripping people of their dignity, this goes back to the Zimbardo prison experiment. I don't know if you ever, that's where they put Stanford students behind bars, treated them without, and seeing how you actually, behavior changes really quick. When you strip dignity away from people, when you strip respect, you almost create the kind of outcomes in terms of the behavior of a person. That long in solitary confinement, psychological professionals conclude, can actually trigger mental illness, can actually cause trauma to a person, affect the way they're behaving. So this kind of systemized traumatization that people are going through actually affects their well-being, affects their behavior and the like. So that's something we can talk about. But you put something out there heavy, and I just want to call this out, because a lot of folks wonder why you use heavy terms like the slave block. And I want you to know that the war on drugs has hurt white Americans, has hurt black Americans, it's hurt all Americans. You can go to Appalachian communities or poor factory towns or places here in my state and see how poor people have been so disproportionately targeted. But I just want to say something about the racial component, because we know in America there is no difference between blacks and whites for using drugs or dealing drugs. In fact, young white men have a slightly higher rates of according to some studies, of dealing drugs. But if you're African American, you're about 4 times more likely to be caught for it, 4 times more likely to be arrested for it, and typically you will get a longer sentence. Nobody, I went to Stanford University, drug rings going on there, conspiracies, who's going out to buy the pot, bringing it back, reselling it. There's no sting operations on college campuses. There's nobody getting stopped and frisked on the way home. The FBI is not setting up some kind of investigation to see how kids are getting their Adderall or their ecstasy or what have you. These are targeted in certain communities. But this is why loaded language like this, and Michelle Alexander uses a book called The New Jim Crow, because when historians look at this and its effect on certain communities, this war on drugs, you can start in this country with the sin of slavery. As soon as that ended in Reconstruction, the worst time of domestic terrorism in the United States of America, in which people were being routinely killed in terrorist attacks, was in the post-Reconstruction period. That ended into Jim Crow, which lasted for decades. Right around the end of Jim Crow, you were talking about the 70s and 80s, started this war on drugs, where our prison population, as you said, has gone up 500% nationally, 700% for women. But who has been disproportionately incarcerated? It's been people of color. And so now you have this full circle moment where you're using language about being chained, but understand now there are more African Americans in this country under criminal supervision than all the slaves in 1865. And not only has it been a way of sort of repression of poor people, repression of people of color, but it's also ties into every other aspect of our nation. There'd be about 20% less poverty in this country if we had this incarceration rates the same as our industrial peers. But that poverty is being focused on communities, often poor communities of color, where as soon as you start pulling away mothers of children, pulling away fathers and families, and then telling them when they come back out, their economic power has been stripped away from them, you drive poverty in. But even voting rights, you literally have legislative debates going on a century or so ago where they said, let's decide, this is how we're going to stop blacks from getting their voting rights. We're going to create something called felony disenfranchisement. So if we can create a black code, get you to violate that code, now you can never vote again. Well, this is a legacy of that. You now have states like Florida that are a swing state in this country where 1 out of every 5 black people cannot vote because of felony disenfranchisement. Again, doing nonviolent crimes, sometimes the same kind of crimes. Now that I've introduced a bill on legalizing marijuana, cannot tell you how many people in Congress have been talking to me about their usage, or about the 2 presidents, President Bush and Obama, who did serious drugs. Certain people, if you're wealthy, if you're privileged, if you're connected or elected, you're not going to get certain treatment. But if you're poor, if you're a woman, if you're mentally ill, you're going to be targeted with this kind of drug enforcement. When your humanity is stripped from you, when your dignity is stripped from you, when you're being targeted in ways that other people are, not equal justice under the law, that using language like that is not inappropriate. It is spot on, in my opinion.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you addressing that, because, I mean, I grew up in Manorville, Long Island. We were the only black family in our neighborhood. My parents were franchise business owners. I went to college. Like, so I understand the difference. Like I said, I was politicized in prison, so I understood.
Well, so can you and I have a similar background? So let me just tell you one story, though. So I grew up in the best town, and I shouldn't say that because this is a great town, too. I love all my New Jersey towns, but I grew up, we were the first black family to integrate a city. We literally had to get a white couple to pose as a spy house in Harrington Park, New Jersey. I have great communities, some of my best friends still in those towns. But I watched us. I'm a senator, so I can't admit breaking any drug laws.
Right.
But I watched us break drug laws. I still remember senior cut day, 4 of my friends, they kicked open, they went to go buy alcohol. The place was closed. They kicked open the door to steal some cases of beer. They got caught. Now, if the same crime happens in different communities in our country, those kids, they'll sit in Rikers Island for months and months and months before they get a trial. But the kids, the right thing happened when my friends got in trouble, which is parents get involved, police, things, okay, taken care of. Those kids are on making a living, earning, and so on and so forth. But the disproportionate, and you've seen this, if you've been like me, living in different communities, you've seen different justice system applied differently in different places.
Absolutely.
I've got to ask you now, about the national conversation around drug laws. Do you feel that now that the opioid epidemic has hit every suburb all over this country, there's a different conversation going on than there was during the crack epidemic?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that what the crack epidemic led to is a demonization. We heard talk about super predators and all of this heavy language. Just the way we talked about people was stealing their humanity and not understanding that this is an addiction, a terrible addiction. Now we have more people learning from that experience and seeing it in communities all across this country. And there seems to be a different empathy now and an understanding. I can stand in front of audiences all over the state and saying, we are not going to arrest our way out of this problem. People recognize that, people will applaud, people will feel a sense of gratitude. But unfortunately, we didn't see that back when this horrific drug hit poorer communities. And so I don't want to. I really believe we are one nation with one destiny, that nobody can be suppressed without all of us being suppressed. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we need to come together and understand, have a more courageous empathy now for women that are behind bars. You use words like being rendered invisible. It's terrible we're still visiting Ralph Ellison's sort of idea. There are no throwaway people. And so what I want from my state and from my nation is to understand this interconnectedness, this interwoven destiny, that this scourge of drug addiction is affecting us all. And the one thing most Americans don't know is in New Jersey, we should be up in arms, as everybody should be, because I've traveled internationally to places whose trains are faster than ours, whose ports are more efficient, beautiful roads and bridges. In New Jersey, we've seen all of these things crumble, except for one area of infrastructure, which other countries, I've been in other countries, literally they ask me, why are you guys doing this to yourself? But between the time I was in law school to the time I was in mayor of the city of Newark, New Jersey, we were building a new prison in this country every 10 days, putting billions and billions of dollars into that infrastructure while our bridges and our roads were crumbling. God, if we had put it there, think of the thousands of jobs we could have created, people we could have put to work, but instead we've locking human beings up at rates that humanity has never seen before. And so these are self-inflicted wounds, and that's why the conversation is shifting. I'm so happy, and I don't care what party you're in. I'm happy that I've got Newt Gingrich, Grover Norquist. I mean, you pick the national Republicans who are starting to get this, that this is bad, this is government gone amok, this is stealing people's liberty, this is fiscally irresponsible. There's no justification. And God, if you're a Christian in this country, it violates every principle of Christianity about how to treat the poor, how to treat the vulnerable, how to treat people even in prison. Matthew 25, for those of you who are of that faith. So I just think that there's a growing movement, but the consciousness is not there. When I speak about our bill, I hear people gasp when I explain to people what you've been through. Just when people find out that pregnant women are being shackled still in this country, or that we're releasing people in prison with nothing, saying, okay, here's your $100, go on your own. And by the way, you have to check boxes so you can't get jobs. By the way, if you want to try to be a taxi driver, you can't do that for something you did 18 years ago.
If you want life insurance,
if you
can't get
get
life
a
insurance.
loan from the bank because you want to start a business, can't get that.
Too.
A Pell Grant to go to college, to get training, you can't get that. Wait a minute, you served your debt, you went through the hell you described. You went through the hell you described for a non-violent drug-related crime, and now we're telling you that we're stripping for the rest of your life your ability to get life insurance, your ability to get a Pell Grant, your ability to get food, all of those things stripped from you for a lifetime sentence. And that's what people don't understand, that this is what goes on in this country. And by the way, I have a perspective of what other countries do to their incarcerated people, which is dramatically different in a lot of our industrial peers. The way they create communities within prison that deal with people's addiction better than we do, deal with people's trauma better than we do. And when they come out from prison, it's like the Bible. I hate to keep quoting that as a Christian, but it's not about closing doors to people. It's like the prodigal child. We're going to do everything we can to help you get a job, because we know if you get a job, number one, it's cheaper, because you're going to start paying taxes, taking care of your children, as opposed to what we have in this country, which is recidivism rates that are so dramatic. And by the way, those teenagers that I talk to on the streets, you guys might know some of the people I'm talking about. When I was mayor, February, 2 o'clock in the morning, I stop and get out of the car and talk to the fellows in the corner. Why are you out here? Because you're not making a minimum wage, and this is the worst working conditions. If OSHA was around, they would say that this is violating all the OSHA laws. Why are you out here? Because I'd have no hope for my life because I got tagged when I was 17 with a nonviolent drug crime. I've tried to get a job. I used to have people, when I first got mayor, I was so desperate, show up at my house 6 o'clock in the morning if you're serious. I'd have guys lined up in front of my home where I lived because they just want a chance at living a law-abiding life. And if you don't create that, they're going to get back in trouble and recidivate and cost all of us tens of thousands of dollars a year to lock them up, when it would be so much cheaper to treat their drug addiction and give them some job training and give them a shot at getting a job.
And Senator, you have fought against mandatory minimum sentencing for nonviolent drug offenders. But right now, with Donald Trump in the White House, with Jeff Sessions as the Attorney General.
Why are you trying to bring me down?
No, I'm trying to ask you how this country moves forward.
Well, I mean, it's outrageous that you had this country, you have Republican governors moving in a different direction. The Republican governor of Georgia lowered recidivism in his state, lowered violent crime as a result. Shocking that when you empower people to succeed, your violent crime goes down. But then you have Jeff Sessions, who is a throwback to an era before that came before, turning back this idea that Obama said, which was, hey, let's not charge you the highest level charge for nonviolent drug crime. Jeff Sessions literally is starting to have conversations about going after law-abiding citizens that might be in Colorado or medical marijuana states, saying, hey, let's go after them and try them federally, even though they're abiding by their state laws. This is a scary moment, what's going on right now. And so what I'm trying to do is to raise people's consciousness, because I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, this is just not right. And if you are American that believes in equal justice under the law and being smart on crime, not just tough on crime, but being smart on crime, you know there's a different way. So I know we are in a bad situation, but what I've learned from a lot of women in prison, under the worst circumstances, you have a choice. You can surrender to the darkness, or you can decide to be the light, like you ladies are. And so I've decided to be the light, even amidst the days of Jeff Sessions. I'm going to continue to propose smart, sensible legislation, common sense solutions to our crime problem, to make Americans safer, and to empower the people that get caught up in the system.
Senator, there is a pattern in American politics where change only happens after the people most affected speak up, raise their voices, and make change. And you all, by being here today, are giving voice to a group of people who are silenced. So I want to thank you for sharing your time, sharing your experiences, your work, and your hopes for the future.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say to these women, and I get a little emotional, because I've seen, ladies that have gone through such hell, and often the women who are the best fighters are the ones that have seen the greatest hell. And I know in Newark, we have organizations of women who just are the leaders, are my inspiration, are the ones that say, you know what, God brought me through hell, but I'm stronger, and I'm going to be a better fighter. So I just want you all to know, you inspire me when I do. I'm in awe of who you are. Thank you for being light amidst the darkness. And if I can support you in any way as a United States Senator, I just love you and thank you. Don't stop, and I know that you are on the right side of history, and that your work, like Harriet Tubman, is laying the foundation for abolition in a way, in a bigger sense. And I know more people, especially hearing platforms like this, are going to join your cause and start demanding greater justice in America.
Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.